This is part 4 of a study that we started last Sunday. It's called The Love of Money. Now, as we say this, please remember that we always preface our remarks lest there be misunderstanding. We're not saying that money is not important, that money should not be esteemed, that we should not work for money, nor work for an opportunity to be promoted and prospered. That's not what we're talking about. God's whole system is that we work, but there's another system, of course, and that is the system of grace. We do our best, and we allow His grace to promote us and to prosper us, because we do not trust in what we earn to see us through. Though there is a sense, of course, and a measure, yes, it's there, and that's what buys food and so forth. But the bottom line is, it's God who by His grace provides our every need. Now, we said, too, that this particular subject of money is one of the most unpopular subjects ever addressed from a pulpit. And it's simply because when you speak on money, you're usually hitting people right where it hurts. Every chord of attachment from the purse goes all the way deep into the heart, and most often it does hurt when you talk about money. So we have to qualify it. Yes, money's important and should be impersonally esteemed. But now, on the one hand, there are those in the so-called welfare state who are looking for something for nothing. And not everyone in the welfare state is doing that. Sometimes you get caught in life and you have to go through a humbling process until you see that God, by His grace, can help you to be self-sufficient. And of course, we encourage that. We applaud those who do that. But there's another hand. On the other side, there are those who have money and also expect something for nothing. And they want the best of life without having to pay for it. They too, along with those in the welfare state, live in a fantasy world. It simply cannot be. You simply cannot have your cake and eat it too. It's impossible. But those who live in that fantasy world have a disease. It's a spiritual disease called the love of money. And we came to see that there's a special Greek word for that, meaning to have a personal love for silver. Now remember, money should be loved impersonally or esteemed impersonally. Whether you have it or not, you have the living God who cares about you. And that's the important thing. But people who love money have the love of silver. Now, the word phileo is there, indicating a personal love, meaning that there is a deep attachment to that silver and something in your heart. There is an affection, a click, something that's very similar or compatible. And then the second word means silver. And we came to find that that word means two things. First of all, the love of money itself. To be so miserly that what's most important is to have it in the bank. Either not want to pay out, or just simply to live like a miser, live like a hermit. We've all heard the stories of people who would search through the garbage for food and clothes and so forth, and underneath their mattress was $1 million. Now, that's what we're talking about, the lover of money. Or to love what money can buy, its purchasing power. And this message, honestly, it's just sort of fell into my lap as we started this. And then it dawned on me, it's Christmas. On the one hand, there are those who are going to just spend and spend and spend and spend. And on the other hand, there are going to be those who are like Scrooge and not want to pay out at all. Now, the thing is, as believers, we want to be consistent in our theology. Sometimes that's difficult. Most often, things like this are not even developed in churches. What we will talk about is, as has been mentioned, the little baby Jesus and all of the trappings and the programs that involve Christmas. But no one's going to talk about the love of money except us. Why? Because if you go to church on Christmas to see their program, and you do not proportionately give throughout the course of the year, making Jesus Lord of your money, it's a farce. It's hypocrisy. We don't want you to do that. We don't want to be part of that sort of thing. Yet that's what goes on in churches. Now, we found then that this love of money originally was had by Lucifer. He had 4 things that led him from the 5th and most important thing. He had wisdom above all creatures, Bible doctrine, which should have governed his view and use of his possessions. But his circle of friends, he wanted them to think, I've got these possessions. His mind or intellect, his brightness, his beauty, his body, those were 3. But then it says, and it's first on the list, the merchandise you have. He was the first one to be a lover of money or a lover of material things over a lover of God. Now that's what we're talking about. When money becomes more important to you than utilizing it for the service of Jesus Christ, then God is not your God, money is. We came to find that indeed the term avarice applies to that, not used in Scripture, but it is actually used under the term covetousness. Now, you're covetous when you have a greedy desire to have and to hold a greater quantity than that which rightfully belongs to another. In other words, you want to hold on to it, you don't want to pay out, even though the other person deserves to be paid. Or if you want to hold on to your money, you're just simply, as I said, being miserly. You have the King Midas touch. Now, King Midas found out about avarice and covetousness. What do I mean by that? Well, he found out, and we've turned to Psalms chapter 115, that there is a factor involved in this. Those who worship other gods begin to resemble them. Now, if you have avarice or covetousness against God, that is idolatry. If you have covetousness against others, that is evil. In other words, you're wanting simply to use others to promote yourself without giving them their just due. And then you want to have the money, the silver, rather than the true God is occupying your time and your mind. Now, you know when money is your God, when you willfully, and that was the key word, if any man will be rich. And that word there simply means to superimpose your will over the will of God. God may want you in a certain area where you cannot make as much as you would if you were out of His will in another area. The will of God is the most important thing, and the example that we always give is a missionary. Now, something about missionaries. I believe that you should be a missionary without having to pour mouth like you're dressing and living out of the mission barrel. I don't believe in that business. I think you should do the best you can. Dress up, promote the grace of God, trust God to meet your needs, and so forth. But on the other hand, if you're in the darkest corner of Africa, you're not going to make the money that you do if you're someplace in America. But if the will of God is for you to be there, where should you be? Where are you going to get the most for your eternal dollar as you redeem the time? Well, in darkest Africa, of course. That is the will of God. But that's the point Paul is making. If any man will be rich, to superimpose your will over God's will in that of wanting money. Now, we found that was the lean soul, fat soul thing, which simply means there are those who tend to hold on to, be tight-fisted about their money in having all of this. But at the same time, God sends leanness to their soul. Why? Because they're not occupied spiritually with the being that they should be. Instead of the spiritual being the emphasis of their life, the material is. On the other hand, the liberal soul, it says, shall be made fat. Those who give accordingly, live according to God's word with respect to money, have a prosperous reserve in their soul. Now, that brings us then to this point. Verse 4 in chapter 115 of Psalms. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they don't speak. Eyes, they don't see. Verse 6, ears they don't hear. Noses they have, they smell not. They have hands, but they handle not. Feet, they walk not. Neither speak they through their throat. Now I guess our little Sunday school song this morning with the Father up above. Only through anthropomorphisms does God have all of these things. God is the Spirit. He really doesn't have eyes, ears, and so forth. But because we tend to make our gods out of the substance that we worship most, and we want to control them and fashion their image, that's what he's talking about here. Silver, the lover of silver, more than the lover of God, tends to make an idol. But the problem with that is that you begin to resemble the very thing that you make. Why are you here this morning? Well, hopefully, it's to hear God's spiritual words. The flesh profits nothing. It's the Spirit. My words are spirit. Because you want to resemble your Father. What is He? Spirit and truth. But if your God is silver, what is silver? It is a metal. It's cold. It's hard. It's impersonal. It doesn't care if you're crying out in prayer to it. It cannot answer you nor help. Verse 8. They that make them are like unto them. So is everyone that trusts in them. The more you keep looking from your soul to this money god that you have, the less spiritual truth you have. And the more you become like that God. Now, how is that God? As I said, impersonal. There are other people that have needs, but you're tight-fisted. You don't want to give of your resources. There are other people who should be paid attention to. But the bottom line of your life is not to meet the needs of people through your money. It's to be like your God. Cold, hard, impersonal, hard-hearted, and so forth. Now, those who worship other gods begin to resemble them. And that is an important factor in this love of money. And you simply have to ask yourself the question. I have people round about me, family, friends, co-workers, schoolmates, and the like. Do I genuinely care about them, their success, their prosperity? Or do I stingily hold on to my money? Is that more important than the needs of people in my periphery? Now we're going to turn to Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7. And we see another factor that becomes part of this business of loving money. What is that? It is an old saying. And the old saying goes back to the law of God will revenge. God is not mocked. A man reaps what he sows. And from that comes what goes around, comes around. But actually, there is a business term in this. It actually revolves around money. And we'll see that from a couple of principles here. Verse number 1 says, judge not that you be not judged. Actually, the term says in the Greek, don't judge unrighteously, that ye be not judged unrighteously. Obviously, if there were a man in a khaki suit with a full beard smoking a Cuban cigar with a 45 on his side, came in here and said, this is a stick-up, we would all say, you're a robber, you're a thief if you do that. You're threatening our lives. Are we making a judgment? Yes, but is it right? Absolutely. That's what he is. That's what he's doing. But it's talking about making unrighteous judgments. And In this, we're going to see that it actually has to do with money. If a certain thing is a certain price, and the price, as the show says, is right, and you don't want to pay it, you want the person to take less, you're unrighteous in your judgment. You're asking that person to do something that you yourself will not do. Take less for your goods. Take less for your services. That's what it's actually talking about. How do we know? Look, verse number 2. For with what judgment in business ye judge, you're going to be judged again. With what measure ye meet, and that is a business term, it shall be measured to you again. Now, that's why we talk about this matter of cut rate. Always looking for more for less. We'll address that in just a little bit. But to me, again, this matter of trying to make things consistent, it's difficult. Sometimes you have to give a little and compromise in some areas until you can make your whole life consistent. But if you don't want a discount, why do you ask somebody to give you one? If you don't want to give a discount for your services, what is that? That's the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them to do unto you. But we're constantly, it's what is tantamount to begging. That's why, as your pastor, I've said, let's quit asking. If somebody says, okay, we give all churches a discount, that's fine. But this matter of asking for discounts becomes tantamount to begging, is what it is. Well, we can't pay the full price, so would you please give us a little less? Will you please take a little less for it? Phooey! For with what measure ye meet, it's going to be measured to you again. If you want to be chintzy to that fella, believe you me, somebody's going to be chintzy to you. And when you're taken, you know what? You're going to fuss about it. Boy, I'll never let that happen to me again. So what we're talking about here is what goes around comes around. And if indeed you make an increase on it because you gypped somebody out of something, your soul becomes lean because money is your God. You are evil in that you're using people and you're worshiping another God. Something more important than God's will and his just system of payment is more important to you. Luke chapter 6. And verse number 38. Give, and it shall be given unto you. See, I want full payment. I want the right price for my services, my commodities, my goods. And then when it comes time for you and your profession, now there are other factors in here. Please don't misunderstand. Maybe you're just at an entry-level job and you're making so much and you don't have the experience and so forth. Well, there is a commensurate pay scale, of course. But the point is, what I'm talking about is that we do not want to take less for our services, but when it comes to giving out, we want others to take less for theirs that we might be benefited. And I ask you, is that not stealing? Is that not asking somebody to give you of their time and talent and resources and materials so you're benefited but they have less? Is that not extortion? It absolutely is. If you want to be paid, then why be chintzy about paying someone else? Now, I'm not saying, as I preface my remarks again, that you cannot, if something is out of your pay scale, then you have to go elsewhere. It would be more appropriate, in my opinion, to go elsewhere to find what your needs are on a level of your own pay scale, of your own lifestyle and so forth, your own annual salary, than to go to a place that you can't afford and constantly ask them to take less for their material. Do you expect a premium for your work? Do you expect the best for what you do? Why would you expect somebody else not to want to have the same? And that's the point that we're trying to make. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, shall men give into your bosom. For with the same measure that ye meet, withal it shall be measured to you again. I don't want to pay the price, but when I do the work, I want people to pay a premium for me. Nonsense. That's inconsistent. That's hypocritical. You can't ask somebody to better your life and not expect to pay for it. And then when the reverse is true, you want the money for your job. Now, it was already quiet in here prior to the service. It was quiet. I guess it's the gray skies. Maybe it's just because I'm speaking on something that is near and dear to all of our hearts. And remember, I said all of our hearts. Because for years, I thought differently until I came to see the truth on the love of money. Now, we're going to go from here to what I call the more for less syndrome. May I say to you that that is a pipe dream? Everybody wants more for less. The problem with that is, it's an impossibility. You can't have more for less and still have a standard of life. For example, if somebody over here makes $25,000 a year and somebody over here makes $25,000 a year, and this one is in the buying and selling thing, and this is in the working the workaday job type deal. Each needs a certain amount of money to come their way, a certain price to come in before they can pay for that. And then for you to go to this person who sells and say, I want more for less, something always has to be wrong. Either the quality of craftsmanship is not as good, the benefits for the employees are not as good, the salary is not as good. And though you cannot see those faces, when you go to these cut rate places, please remember that is what has to go. It can't be the same quality. It is impossible to be the same quality. You get what you pay for. Now that's not a Bible verse, but it's sure a Bible principle. You get what you pay for. And if it costs a certain amount to maintain that lifestyle, and they want a lifestyle, $25,000, equal with yours, $25,000, then they have to sell it for a certain price. And if they don't, they're pushing their materials and they're not as good, or the benefits for their workers are not as good, or their salaries are not as good. It has to be that way. Something has to go. Something has to be what? Cut out. And usually it's their employees. Now I ask you the question, do you want to work for that type of salary? Do you want somebody to give more of your time and energy for less money? It is a pipe dream that Madison Avenue, New York, has foisted upon the United States of America, that you somehow can get more for less. Now, if you do, somebody else is sacrificing for the less. And that's what I'm talking about. Behind those materials that you buy is a worker that gets less money. Their conditions are worse than the conditions you would work in. Need I tell you that maybe some of them are coming from sweatshops? Some of them are coming from the Industrial Revolution type business where they owned a person, lock, stock, and barrel. Tennessee Ernie Ford, I own my soul to the company store. That's what it's talking about here. More for less. Building your happiness on someone else's unhappiness. Building your reserve by not wanting to pay out. It can't be done. Now, that is prevalent in today's society. Now, I'm going to say something here, and before somebody gets mad, I'm going to hit both management and labor, okay? So you'll know as I make this remark, I've got a couple remarks coming up on this side, so both sides can hold their ire, wrath, or whatever you want to call it until I'm done. The more for less syndrome. I have known, remember, I've been in this business a long time, but I have known, here is where the unions went bad. I have known the unions to threaten and strike and hurt their employers for more pay, and then fuss and fume because they have to go to, say, a union grocery store because they don't want to go there because what? The prices are more. Well, how in the world can you pay for union benefits unless the price is passed along to the consumer? If you fuss and fume and threaten over your salary, and then go to a grocery store and say, well, the prices are too high because it's a union shop, and don't pay those prices, that is hypocrisy. It's more for less. You want others to give more for you, but you don't want to pay the price for them to have the same salary and the same benefits and the same package deal. Now, we have to be realistic in this business. There's no such thing as more for less. And if that is your attitude, you're chintzy and stingy and cheap and all the other words. The shoe will fit. Okay, let's look then at what the Bible says. Please remember, we're going to hit management over here just a little bit, so hold on to your horses. This goes for all of us. Work and wages. What are we looking for? Something for nothing. Management wants more work, but less pay. That little mark will kill my soul. I'm such a perfectionist. My black pen fell down there. Okay. And I'll have to wait till after the service to correct it. Gracious sakes alive. What does the worker want? He wants more pay for less work. It's more for less in every situation. The problem is that you're somewhere along the line. There has got to be that happy medium where there is an equality, there is a concern, where the management cares about its employees. Scrooge did not care about his employees until he saw the three ghosts of Christmas. But on the other hand, do you know any employees that don't care about the company, that don't give of their time, who watch the clock, who are always on coffee breaks, who are always getting a drink of water? Do you know anybody like that? But they want their pay at the end. It's wrong. It's more for less. You can't do it. Somebody's hurt. Either the employee is hurt or the employer is hurt. On the other hand, what about the seller and the buyer? Well, the seller wants more price for less product, and the buyer wants more product for less price. It's something for nothing. My contention is there's no such thing. Somebody somewhere had to pay for it. Or, shall we say, somebody somewhere had to sacrifice. Now, as I deal with this, please understand there are other factors that enter into this. Overhead, and that sort of thing. Cost of materials, benefit packages, salaries, and that sort of thing. Where you live in the country. There are a lot of things that enter into this. If you're a store that sells in volume and the like, you can offer a cheaper rate, as it were, because you're selling a whole lot. So you take the profit margin less for the product, but in the long haul, you sell so much of it, your profit margin is still high. Okay, that's the concept of the mart stores, and that's fine. But the point that I am making here is somewhere along the line, the more for less syndrome, the something for nothing concept needs to be purged from our minds as believers. Now, we'll never purge it from the world, but we better purge it from our thinking. Otherwise, let's turn to Leviticus 19. Leviticus 19. And verse number 13. Now, the first word we're going to look at from this is the word defraud. And we've got a few moments. I think we can go through this frame with the words and still end in time and then start at a good place. There is a good place to start on such a message in the next hour. Okay? What if an employer gets so much work from an employee and tries to lessen his pay, gets something for nothing? What does he do to that person? He defrauds him. What does an employee do to an employer when he doesn't do what he's supposed to, what he's capable of, and yet expect more pay for less work? What does he do to the employer? He defrauds him. What does the producer, the seller, expect when he ups the prices and he gouges the public for less product? He defrauds him. What do you do when you're constantly looking for less price, give me a bargain, give me a discount, and you don't, and you want more product for less price? What are you doing? Defrauding. Somewhere along the line, somebody's paying for what you get. If you get more for less, somebody will pay for it. It may be a textile worker in the Carolinas, but somebody is going to pay for it with a less price, with less salary, if you get more for less. All right? Verse number 13. Thou shalt not defraud thy neighbor. Employee, employer, buyer, seller. Don't defraud your neighbor. Neither rob him of the wages that is hired. The wages of him, rather, that is hired shall not abide with thee all night until the morning. Now, just an explanation on that last part. When we're talking about this agrarian society, culture, money pretty much for your services was given at the end of every day. So that if somebody did a day's work for you, at the end of that day, you had their money ready. Now, we live in the age of 30 days billing, 90 days, same as cash, and so forth. If we're willing to do that, and it can come out all right, that's fine. But one of the reasons that this was not allowed was simply because at the end of the day, if you kept their money and your money was in the bank and it was their money, what happens when money is in the bank? It makes what? Interest. And you have earned interest on another person's money that belonged to him, that if it was in the bank for him, it would have earned him more prosperity than you. That's why God says, look, if it's due him, pay your bills. Pay them on time. Don't keep that money. Why? Simply because you're trying to get a little more interest in having it in the bank on another person's money that's rightfully his, and the interest belongs to him. Now, if they give you 30 days, that's one thing. But when the 30 days comes due, paying. Now, let's look at two words, and we're done. Don't defraud your neighbor. What does the word defraud mean? Ashak, Hebrew. To deprive of some right or property by fraud or oppression. What is oppression? Oppression is often what the word the liberals use, but it's true. Sometimes corporate America can have their gods as silver and be deaf and sightless to the needs of their workers, so that they build their empires and money on giving somebody else less for their labor. Extortion, we'll talk about this word in just a little bit. Exploitation or threat. If they did the work and it was the quality that you, it's commensurate with that standard, this constant asking for less is simply to take something that rightfully belongs to them. Make it your own so that you can prosper two ways. You have the money and you have the commodity, while they don't have the money and they don't have the commodity or the time to make it up. It is defrauding. And it's serious. It's part of the law. Secondly, it says, don't rob him. Now, what is that? The Hebrew word gazal. And it means to deprive of something that legally belongs to him or is due him. You can't do it by theft, spoiling, and here is the kicker, lessening in amount. God views this business either way of taking from someone, employer, employee, buyer, seller, on either end. If this is your lot, if they did the work, they deserve to be paid, the laborer is worthy of his hire, you use that verse whenever it comes time for you to get a paycheck. Then the golden rule says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Quit your griping and belly aching. If they did the work, pay the price. Now again, that's assuming that all things are equal. They did the work. They're not gouging you with the price and so forth. When somebody does a work, whether it's stitching a sweater, canning a can of corn, whatever, building, if somebody did the work and they have a pay scale, and they really did it, all things being right, not to give them their due is known as defrauding them and or robbing them. And it becomes a serious business as far as God is concerned.